I know some people who, after drinking ayahuasca for a number of years regularly, they don't even drink anymore because they are constantly with vision. One of them I know personally, and he was telling me literally every time he just rests a bit and closes his eyes, he's with full blown uh, colorful visions as if during ceremony. But I did not hear this type of stories from the Shipibos, although over there shamans, many of them do it professionally, drinking for decades, some of them five, six, 7 times a week, like that.
I think that it's really common to not have to drink ayahuasca anymore. My teacher, Doña Bilma, doesn't drink ayahuasca anymore either. Um, I think that you just gain your connections, your relationships become so well developed that it's really just about those communications and those relationships. And ayahuasca was what allowed you to develop those relationships better, to enhance those relationships. But ultimately, like, you don't even really need ayahuasca to form those relationships. And in the end, it's much more about those communications. And if ayahuasca can enhance your ability to have those communications, then you can choose to still continue to take it. And if you don't need that enhancement to gain the value of those communications, then you don't need it.
It happens that the healers remove problems from their patients and pick up them themselves, even experienced ones. So usually, people are advised to visualize that they throw the disease, I don't know, in an ocean of salty water. But apparently, it's not that simple. Do you have any additional, like, practical uh, tricks to avoid this problem?
In this tradition, you would do your diets, and it would be through your diets that you would be protected from that happening. So you would want to make sure that you had always continued to do your diets to set up that framework, that those powerful relationships, and then cultivating those relationships and maintaining them. And that's why you continue to do your diets also. It's not like you just do your diets and then you're a curandero, like you never stop. You continue to do them, and it's through your diets that you ensure that you're protected, and that goes for black magic as well. Like, the way to ensure that you are unaffected by it is to always have strong diets.
So, what is the difference between ayahuasca experience and the dreams at night and lucid dreaming? Could you compare the three of them?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that they're pretty similar. Obviously, the difference between dreaming and being in the ceremony is that you're conscious. But if you then compare it to lucid dreaming, then they become very, very similar. And I do think that they are, I guess I would personally believe the ceremony over the lucid dream. I would give it more weight, because I entered into it consciously, and because of the nature of how Western culture views dreaming. So even if it is a dream and I'm lucid in it, it's still just a dream. Whereas I'm not affected by that conditioning when it comes to ayahuasca, even though it exists. I'm sure some people would say, well, you were just drinking ayahuasca. But for me, perhaps because of the time I've spent here, I would, I would have more faith and trust in the reality of that experience than I would with the lucid dreaming. But that's based on my own conditioning. So, in terms of just the pure experience, I would say that they're practically identical.
Knowing that there are many kinds of people being helped in so many ways by responsibly drinking ayahuasca with capable practitioners, what is your description of those for whom you might recommend against the use of ayahuasca?
It depends, if you're talking about going to an ayahuasca retreat or going to a center with a group of people, like that type of program, then it would probably not be advised for someone that was diagnosed schizophrenic or had any sort of psychosis, psychotic diagnosis, and extreme bipolar, personality disorders, because the likelihood of them coming to the surface during the ceremonies would be high. Also, those types of conditions involve a lot more healing outside of ayahuasca ceremonies. And, ayahuasca does play an important part, and it gets a tremendous amount of attention, and it's understandable why. But when I was talking about, the diets, I wasn't talking about ayahuasca. I was talking about dieting all of the other plants that play an equally important role in the healing process. And most conditions are not healed by ayahuasca. Most conditions are healed by one or a group of other plants. And unfortunately, most of those other treatments don't occur outside of the Amazon, or at least to the extent that they do. And even in the tourist centers inside the Amazon, a lot of those treatments are not included. But if you were to receive treatment from a true curandero, then they would involve a lot more than just drinking ayahuasca. And in the end, you would most likely give credit to the plants that healed you in their treatments rather than to ayahuasca, even though ayahuasca would form an important component in that process. And so in the case of bipolar or schizophrenia or personality disorder or psychosis, things of those natures, there would be a real need to receive treatment outside of the ceremony or apart from the ceremony. In fact, that treatment could be exclusively apart from the ceremony. But if you were to drink ayahuasca, there would be a likelihood that condition would be amplified. And if you were with a group of people, it could cause problems. It could be a detriment to the rest of people's experiences, which could cause negative response and, create a problematic situation. So I would say if you have been diagnosed with a mental condition of that nature, it would probably be best not to drink ayahuasca, or at least to seek out help from a shaman that would treat you one-on-one, and more than likely without ayahuasca, at least at first.
For those who are very sensitive to food and chemicals, have you ever seen a case where someone had an allergic reaction to the ayahuasca brew?
Oh man, it would be hard to try to say if someone's reaction was allergic. There's a lot of different reactions, and all of them just fall naturally into how people react. So I don't think that we would ever classify a reaction as allergic. There's just so many ways that people react, and I've drank ayahuasca and had different reactions so many times. I'm sure that on some sort of list of generic allergic reactions, ayahuasca would tick every box. But no, the perception of allergic reaction to ayahuasca has never been brought up, and I don't think we would ever decide to.
There are many people who call themselves channelers. They claim to channel information from various spirits, like they would offer services and charge 200 euros per hour, something like that. And I personally find most of them like untrustworthy. But do you know, can you tell the name of a genuine one that for some reason you happen to know personally or somehow for some reason, and you can testify that he's a genuine channel?
Oh no, I don't know anyone.
Now I have lots of also user submitted questions by viewers of my channel. So many of them were asking, but how to find the right shaman for me? And also the second variation of the same question is, how can I find the right shaman? And also I have little money. You know, young people, they want to go to Peru, but simply cannot afford expensive retreats. So can you give some guidelines? I know it's a difficult question, it's just too general.
I like that you're asking it right after my talk on diets, because my way of describing diets is by comparing them to relationships, and so to answer that question, I'm going to pose a question back, and hopefully that will provide some insights. But how do you know who you want to date? How do you know who you want to enter into a relationship with? And like you don't just like decide haphazardly. There's feelings involved, and of course you meet that person and you have that chance to like get to know them before you make those decisions. But you're ultimately relying on feelings, and you're relying on non-intellectual information, and so your heart really should be the one that decides. Maybe it doesn't all the time, but I think it should be. And I think in choosing a person that you want to allow into your personal space to such a degree, to take on the role of being a healer, it's an intimate relationship as well. And so you want to let your heart decide that as well. You really want to just feel that it is the right person. And I don't know what it takes for you, for each person to be able to feel that, but that should be the goal, would be to feel your way through the decision. I don't really think it's an intellectual decision. Obviously, the best situation would be to be able to actually meet them, to talk with them. So if that's possible, even if it's via email or something, and if it's a retreat center, then I definitely think that you should contact them. You should write a private email, ask if you can call them or do a Skype call if you need to, or if you don't feel sure about it. I know that some people say that once they saw my website, they just knew. And, so in that case, you don't need to contact someone. If you look at someone and you just know, then there you have it. But in terms of the financial aspects of it, there are now ceremonies happening all over the world. So it's not ultimately necessary for you to have to fly to Peru or to the Amazon. I personally do think that it's going to give you the highest chances for having the deepest level of healing. But that's in general. That doesn't, there's going to be exceptions to that, certainly. And there will be very profound, and there are very profound ceremonies taking place by people that are very, very well trained and know exactly what they're doing. I would say outside of the Amazon, that would be a smaller percentage, but they're still happening. But even then, it's complicated because consciousness is such a deep and profound topic, and if you really believe in someone's ability to help you, then the amount of help that you get from them will be directly correlated to the depth of your belief in their ability to help you. So it's, that's part of it too. And I admit that most likely influenced what I just said about your chances of having profound healing, because the way that I think, I feel it's easier for me to put my faith into a 100% indigenous curandero that comes from an ancestral lineage of hundreds of generations. I feel like I have an easier time believing that that person will help me, and an easier time putting my faith in that person, especially if I feel a connection to them on a personal level and my heart feels that's the right person to work with. But that is me, and I could easily see someone thinking for different reasons that someone from a culture that they're familiar with would be better because they understand their problems and the life of what it means to live in that culture. And Shipibos don't know what it's like to live in Turkey or India or Australia or Canada or whatever. And so someone that does live in those same cultures would be able to relate and resonate with the issues that you have more than another person. So in the end, it really comes down to who you feel connected to, who you resonate with, who you feel you can put your faith and trust in. And some of those people are literally in your backyard or in the closest town or the nearest city, and they might charge more for the ceremony itself, but you don't have to pay for the travel expenses. And when it comes to how much something costs, if you really do have faith in it and you really do believe in it, then you'll find a way. Like you'll figure it out.
And yeah, I think I'm finally over with my questions. Sorry for exhausting you and taking so much of your time. Do you have anything to add? If you wish to say something about the research wing in your center opening soon, or anything else, if you have any other message for the newer YouTube channel viewers.
Well, I do plan to open a new center, the Rio Spo Ayahuasca Research Center, early next year. So hopefully we will be able to do some more scientific-based investigations into the nature of consciousness and the role it plays in the healing process, in the hopes of putting together a model of how to enhance any healing process regardless of the treatment method. But I do want to apologize, I guess, because I feel like there were a lot of questions that seemed to be geared in a particular way, and honestly, like I feel just like a regular person. I do have a lot of experience working with ayahuasca, but I don't have much experience outside of that with anything else that might be considered like esoteric or anything like that. I don't really view ayahuasca in those terms. I do view it as a medicine and as a tradition of healing. And so, I don't um, concern myself with like gurus or like concepts. Like I said, I'm not really aspiring to be enlightened. I do feel there are health benefits that come from meditation and yoga and spiritual practices. At the same time, I'm really just trying to find ways to help people to be healthy, and that to me is what the tradition of curanderismo or ayahuasca has been about for thousands and thousands of years, and what it hopefully will continue to be about for thousands more.
Okay, Carlos, thank you for sharing such an amazing stories and information with us. This is probably the best interview I have ever taken so far. It was so enlightening. I'm sure in a year or two maximum I will have again a long list of questions. Maybe you will accept me again. I hope so.
Okay, Sylvie. But thanks. It was good talking to you.
Okay, so thank you very much. And if I can be of any help anytime, just let me know.
Oh, thank you. Thanks very much.
So actually, the interview went much longer than expected, and I apologize for not being able to ask him all the questions that you sent to me prior to the interview, and that is why I will do my best to answer them. I definitely don't have that much experience as Carlos. I've been to Peru only 1 2 years, and I've done over 200 ayahuasca ceremonies, which is much less than him. He has done over 700, and he has access to teachers who have done thousands. But still, I will do my best to share more like experiences and information instead of conclusions. So, first of all, there were lots of questions of the type, does ayahuasca cure this or that disease? I think Carlos answered it indirectly in the first part of the interview, where he explained that one's understanding of ayahuasca will be very partial and limited if one tries to view it as combination of chemicals that would induce certain standard changes and in each individual's body. It does not work like that. Ayahuasca is a magic brew, and the same chemicals produce radically different results in each person's body. So, in practical terms, it may cure one disease for a given person and then not cure it for somebody else. It may swiftly, miraculously fast cure diseases that we are conditioned to think are uncurable or take a very long time to cure or are difficult to cure. And yet, in other cases, for other people, it may not even address issues that are supposed to be easy and fast to cure. But still, I will address one of these questions about curing particular ailments, and it was about how does ayahuasca help with infections. Certainly, thousands of people every day are getting help with their infections with ayahuasca. I myself got a lot of help with all kinds of infections. But if I knew how much MMS could help me, I didn't know about this also miraculous medicine before starting ayahuasca. Probably I would have cured or reduced many of my problems, and then with ayahuasca I could have addressed the more complex issues that MMS cannot cover. So, my advice for anybody suffering from any type of infection or any type of virus is first to try MMS with the DMSO for at least couple of months. And if there is anything left by the time you finish that treatment after a few months, then you may work with ayahuasca that could possibly address the deeper issues in the personality and the belief system which do not allow this sickness to get separated from you. And then the next question is, does ayahuasca have the power to instill empathy in those who do not already have it? For example, cruel and selfish people. Well, if they approach ayahuasca, I'm talking from experience by talking with hundreds of people who have tried the brew, not personal opinions. I'm just sharing their feedback. Those who approach ayahuasca with the feeling that I don't have empathy, please help me to get some of that. Usually she helps. I would say in most cases, she would definitely help very fast. Now, what about people who drink ayahuasca and are cruel and selfish, but don't necessarily have the intention to become less cruel and selfish? Well, it seems that if they have at least the general idea that maybe I should change, but they don't know how, then they may get led towards that idea of becoming less selfish and less cruel. There are some chances of that ayahuasca will help them reach such conclusions themselves. But as far as people who are determined on the road of cruelty and selfishness and just think that's fine, um, I think it's extremely rare. I can't even think of any particular cases that I have heard that really ayahuasca told somebody to change their ways without them first initiating the idea of such change. I think Western people are too much accustomed to this automatic thinking that the deities are personalities that should tell us what to do. Ayahuasca does not fit in that category. And in this connection, and in connection with the possession, which Carlos Tanner so nicely explained earlier, I would like to share a personal experience. So, for a couple of days, I was praying very concentratedly. I was proposing this plan for ayahuasca. Now, let's end up with all my diseases, and we do it like this. We find the root cause of it and just remove it, and everything will get magically fixed afterwards. And in response to that, during a ceremony, much to my surprise, I ended up in a place where I was a man. It was a kind of simple tribal setting, and I was a horrible person. I was just angry, selfish, harming the people around. I looked in the soul of me, actually, in the psyche, and I couldn't find any trace of any kindness, goodness, or anything that we consider worthy. First of all, that was extremely shocking for me because I've never been this type of person, at least in this lifetime. This was so foreign to me, and yet that man, it was me, it wasn't somebody else. Fortunately, in this particular instance, unlike most others during ceremony, I completely figured out how to deal with the situation myself, and it was very easy, at least this time. Because that man was me, I simply merged with him. I became him even more. Although I was already him, there was no doubt that this is me. And I just changed his view of the world. that others should be respected as much you respect yourself. You should never do things to others that you don't wish that are done to you. Things like that. And then I returned to my life. I got some healing benefit, and I left him to continue with his life, but with this new mindset. Now let's have a look at this full experience. Possibly this was just an astral theater organized, orchestrated as a result of my prayers, so that symbolically I face my dark side and things like that. And it worked for me. So that's fine, no doubt, as long as it works and it heals, it's fine. But what about the other person? Was he just an imaginary actor, or was there really such a man in such a tribe living in such a horrible way? That I don't know, because, I mean, it's quite possible. Our souls do have other bodies, we do have other lives. So this is entirely possible that he is or was or will be an absolutely real man. And then what about his perspective of what actually happened? Just somebody coming to his head and changing his psyche completely? And what about if he was using sacred plants? As far as I could see, he was doing something like that. So, did he or his tribal fellow people think that ayahuasca or whatever he was drinking, smoking, actually made him a good person? They could interpret it in that way. Or will they think that some good angelic being came and blessed him and changed his evil ways? This is also a possible way that they could look at it. Can they see the full story because they are also on ayahuasca or something like that? Could they see my visit, the full situation? Possibly they could. But I'm telling this full story in response to this question because it is a good example how, for a person in a tribe, for example, it may look like as if ayahuasca told him or the sacred plants told him to become a good person and made him that way. But actually, it was all initiated by me. Yes, ayahuasca helped, but it was me who did it. And now the next question. Has anyone ever become violent or angry during their ayahuasca session? Well, as far as various degrees of anger, I'm sure that has been experienced because ayahuasca can amplify anything from our psyche. So, anger for sure, 'cause somebody can feel that. But as far as violence, I've never witnessed personally. Um, but surely I have heard about rare cases when people become violent, which is absolutely normal. I mean, how can they not be violent if they can become violent in a normal life? Ayahuasca can just amplify anything. So anything that exists as experience outside of ayahuasca can get amplified. Ayahuasca is certainly not like, for example, alcohol, which maybe in some cases tends to inspire violence in some individuals. No, it is not like that. Such cases are very rare. But again, anything that exists outside of ayahuasca can fall under the magnifying glass. It is absolutely possible. That's why I always advise people to drink with a shaman who knows what is he doing and can take swift action in case anything like this happens. And now the next question. Do the benefits of drinking ayahuasca last a lifetime, or is regular maintenance required? Well, with every healing modality, even if you are completely healed, still your tendency to get such type of diseases may remain. So, in other words, in some cases, ayahuasca may just magically remove your evil cancer tumor. Your cancer tests can be completely fine. But, for example, if you continue with your hatred to your neighbors, you may create another tumor for yourself. And still, at least compared to other healing modalities, the results of ayahuasca, at least relatively, are much more permanent and would require much less maintenance, if any such is required at all. And the next question, is music or singing normally performed during the actual ayahuasca visions? Why or why not? Yes, typically a ceremony would last some 4 or 5 hours, and the singing would be throughout the ceremony. Yes, exactly. You sing when there are visions. You try to direct the visions and the entire experience. The visions are just part of it with the singing. Why? Because this sound, material sound, is the actual practical carrier which transforms the intentions into three dimensional physical reality.